falling, I'm falling, I'm falling. Shouldn't be trusting me, I could be making it all up, you know. Out of control, you don't know. Babe, I'm a danger to myself. Out of control, you don't.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. So, hello, how are you guys doing today? Today we're going to be talking about a really creepy and disturbing individual by the name of Daniel Laplante. Now, I don't think it's Laplante, so we're just going to say Laplante, okay? So this story is really, really interesting, and it's different from what I normally do. And I just wanted to, when I started hearing, like, reading about this story, I was like, what? Creepy. Like, it's creepy. It would be like anybody's worst fear. And it came true for some of these people, and I just wanted to share it. So let's get into it. Daniel Laplante was born May 15th, 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts, a small town that was about an hour away from Boston. It was a beautiful, picturesque town, but just like many small towns, it also had a dark side where some dark people lived and thrived. And one of those dark people was Daniel Laplante. For most of his young years, he suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of his own father. On top of this torture that was happening at home, he was also being bullied at school from his classmates. I don't know why my phone's doing this, you guys, so I'm sorry. I have to keep doing, like, tapping my phone because it keeps getting dim, and I don't know why it's doing that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Daniel was dyslexic, and he was a slow learner, and his appearance was unclean and unkempt. He also suffered from severe acne. His parents divorced when he became a teenager, but by then the psychological abuse that he had endured by his father, the damage was already done. And he was left forever scarred. His mother, in an attempt for some sort of normalcy and family dynamic for Daniel, remarried and put Daniel into counseling to help him deal with all the trauma that he endured by his father. It was then that Daniel was diagnosed with ADHD, and the help that he so desperately needed for this was nowhere to be found. Not only that, but for the next year, he was essayed by his psychiatrist, another man. So yet another adult male that in Daniel's life that took advantage of his vulnerability and weakened mental state. In order to gain some sort of control over his life, he developed a wonderful habit. He began to engage in petty theft. He was only 15. Most nights he would scout out homes to break into. He started out by stealing small valuables, things that wouldn't be missed or immediately noticed. But as always, as they always do, he eventually got bored and he began to escalate, growing bolder every time. He soon discovered that he actually enjoyed toying with his victims as well. Where at one house he would steal a few items, and the next house he would move things around, and then yet another house he would steal items and replace them with other items that he brought with him. So, I mean, imagine being the owner of that home. You're like, what is going on here? Like, that's not my candlestick. That's some, where did that come from? Or, yeah, where is my vase of flowers? And instead there is, I don't know, a vase of dog shit. I don't know, you guys. It's late, okay? I'm trying to get some videos done tonight. I don't know if anyone have a vase of dog shit. Okay, anyway, might cut that out. So it was a game. It was a game to him. It was a game he liked to play, and he won every time. But one house and one family in particular piqued his interest. In 1986, the Andrews family had just lost their wife and mother, Deborah, to cancer. And Frank Andrews was struggling with the loss of his wife and suddenly becoming a single father. But he needed to be strong for his two daughters, Annie and Jessica. Annie and Jessica were just a couple years apart, and they weren't just sisters. They were best friends. Frank worked long hours as a bus driver, and most nights that left the girls home alone. But they were good kids and followed the rules. They were responsible, and they looked out for each other. Not long after moving into their new home, 15-year-old Annie met a boy. Uh-oh. You see where this is going? One night, while the girls were home alone doing homework, the phone rang. On the other end of the line was a boy named Danny. And he asked to speak to Annie. He had gotten her number from a mutual friend. While on the phone, Danny struck up a flirtatious friendship with Annie, and every single night for weeks, Danny would call Annie, and they would talk on the phone for hours. Remember back in the day, anyone who grew up in the 80s, because this was going on in the 80s, and, you know, the phone was everything. We didn't have text messages, we didn't have internet, you know, so we would sit on that phone with these boys for hours. Really, I remember we had the corded phone, and I would drag it into a closet so that I'd have some kind of privacy, and the phone cord, you know, would be stretched to the max, and I'd be getting yelled at for breaking the phone. And so I can picture this. So because they went to different schools, they had never met in person before, and so Danny was able to describe himself however he wanted, and he described himself to Annie as tall and attractive, popular, and captain of the football team. It's pretty safe to say that Danny had Annie completely smitten. After her mother's passing, she hadn't smiled much, and after talking to Danny, she'd never smiled more. She couldn't wait to meet him. And one night, Danny finally asked Annie out on a real date. He asked her out for ice cream and a movie. That night, the doorbell rang, and with butterflies in her stomach, she raced down the stairs to meet this boy that she was just head over heels for. She opened up the door, and she couldn't help but gasp in surprise and shock. This boy at the door could not be Danny. Not her Danny. Not the Danny that she's been talking to on the phone. This was not the self-described popular, tall, handsome athlete that she had pictured. Like, not at all. In fact, this boy was short, messy, and he had acne all over his face. But Annie, being a sweet girl who made a commitment to go out on a date with this boy, decided to go at least out to ice cream with him. And unfortunately, though, her butterflies had completely disappeared. She had zero attraction, and all that excitement, you know, that she was feeling was gone. So the date was very uncomfortable and awkward, and the easy, flirtatious banter that had taken place over the phone so many nights for so many weeks was completely gone as well. And at some point during this conversation, the death of Annie's mother came up. And while the topic was still hard, Annie really needed someone to talk to about all of her feelings surrounding the whole thing, and she hoped that Danny could be that shoulder to lean on. She figured, you know, yeah, I'm not really attracted to him like that, but I do need a friend. And I've been talking to this guy for how many weeks now? Like, he knows me, so we could still be friends, you know? But instead of being supportive and sensitive, Danny got all excited about it. And he began asking all sorts of inappropriate questions and wanting details about her mother's death. Like, he was not worried about, you know, comforting her. He wanted to know how she died, what it was like when she died, you know, all the gruesome parts of death. And that obviously alarmed her. So, of course, she was quite disturbed and immediately shut down that conversation, and she told Danny she needed to get home, and she just walked out of there. She walked away hoping that was going to be the last time she ever had to deal with Danny. But Danny wasn't ready to let that happen. A few nights later, Annie and her sister Jessica were missing their mother. All they wanted was to feel her presence again just one more time, and maybe then the emptiness would go away. So they decided to do a seance, setting up candles and crystals and photos of their mother. They chanted and they prayed for their mother to appear, to speak to them in some way, show a sign that she was there, anything. Nothing happened. They went up to bed after being scolded by their father for doing such a foolish thing. He thought these things were absolutely foolish. There is no, like, afterlife like that. There's no ghosts. There's no way to talk to your mother ever again. She is gone and she's not coming back, and you guys need to stop, the nonsense. So a few nights later, well, they were again alone at home. They were doing homework and they heard knocking, and it wasn't coming from either door though. And they listened again and they waited, and they heard this knock, knock, knock. It seemed to be coming from the house itself. Naturally, they're like, holy crap, like, it worked. Like, it's mom. It had to be their mom. The seance worked, and their mom had listened to them, and she's here, The knocking stopped after a while, and the girls went to bed with smiles on their faces because they felt good that their mom was with them. This knocking continued for several nights, and of course the girls did not tell their father about it, though, because after all, he didn't believe in that kind of thing and thought it was foolish, and they didn't want to get in trouble again. So they were trying to respect his wishes as well, which he wanted them to move on. He really wanted them to kind of get over it, get past it, and move on with their life. Like clockwork, then that knocking happened every single night. And every time the girls would go to get tucked into bed, they would hear it. One night, the knocking became different. It was more of a pounding that wouldn't end, and it kept going until her father came home. The girls were terrified. The pounding was so loud that they knew right then that that was not their mother. The pounding was something sinister. They worried that they mistakenly summoned in something else, an evil spirit, a demon, or whatever. Someone, something posing as their mother at first, but now it was letting them know that they were very wrong, and as their father said, very foolish. The pounding continued for a few more nights, and it came from all over the house. It terrified the girls to the point where they finally told their father. Of course, he didn't believe them. He thought that they wanted attention, and he reassured them that there is no such thing as ghosts or evil spirits, and that really this is what you get for messing around. Like, now you guys have freaked yourselves out for no reason, because the stuff doesn't exist. Frank never heard this banging because it would only happen to the girls when he was away at work, and he kind of figured, based off of what they were saying, that it was just the house settling. The banging continued at all hours of the day and night. Whenever Frank was not there, the girls were, the banging was going on. And the second he would get home, it would stop. But eventually other things started happening too. There was more banging on pipes, doors slamming, lights flickering on and off, and items being moved around and found in random places. Oh look, it's a vase of dog shit over there. Where are my flowers? Alright, enough. Finally fed up, the girls decided to investigate the house, and going down into the basement, they found a terrifying scene. Scribbled on the wall in red was, "I'm in your room, come find me." Can you imagine you did this seance and everything, and you're hearing all this banging and stuff, but you finally decide, you know what, enough is enough, I'm pissed now. And you go downstairs to check, and in red, like writing, there is, "I'm in your room, come and find me." It's like, oh my God. And they're thinking it's a spirit. They're not thinking it's, an actual person. But I think you see where this is going. So they ran upstairs and they called their father, who rushed home. And after seeing it for himself, he called the police. Now the police searched the home and they found nothing. And they also found that the writing was written in ketchup. So Frank believed that his daughters pulled a prank on him, and he was really pissed off. He grounded them, and after that, a few weeks went by with nothing. The girls were actually relieved, and they thought that whatever it was that they had summoned into the home was gone. Until one night, well, alone again, at home watching a movie, the knocking returned. They went upstairs to see where the knocking was coming from because it sounded like it was coming from above them. And they found another message, and it said, "I'm back. Find me." Ugh. Now, this is a true story. This really happened. So, I mean, I don't know what I would do. I would do exactly what they did. They ran out of the house and they ran to the neighbor. Frank came home to his daughters crying hysterically. And Frank had had enough, and he told the girls to stay there at the neighbor's house while he went back to their home to check the house. Believing it was another prank by the girls, he was startled to stumble across a man at the top of the stairs. The man was dressed in Frank's wife's wedding gown, and he was wearing a blonde wig. He had camo paint on his face and a hatchet in his hand. Can we say psycho? Like the movie Psycho too? Like wearing a dress and a wig. And then he's got this hatchet and he's got camo. Oh my God, I would be shitting my pants. Frank ran out of the house and called the police. Frank again searched the home and found a number of... Frank ran out of the house and called the police. Police again searched the home, and they found a number of messages written, including one that said, "Marry me." But they found no sign of the man or anybody else in the home. The officer noted something odd, though. A hidden door behind a bookshelf. Once opened, they found not a man, but a teenage boy. It was Danny Laplante. For months, Danny had been living inside the walls of the Andrews house. Danny was arrested and charged with armed assault, breaking and entering, and armed burglary. He was sentenced to a juvenile facility for 1 year. Really? 1 year. He got 1 year. Frank Andrews and his family moved out of their house, but the story of Danny Laplante was just getting started and would only become more gruesome. Like I've said in almost all my videos, it escalates. It escalates. You don't just start out here. So to think that this crime is the only crime, sometimes not so much. There's always signs, right? So in October of 1987, it was determined that Daniel Laplante would be charged as an adult for what he did to the Andrews family. He was transferred from the juvenile facility to the actual jail, where his mother posted bond for him. So from there, he moved back in with his mother and his stepfather. And almost immediately after he was released, he was right back to his old shit again. But again, one house in particular would prove to be the peak of Daniel's criminal history. Andrew and Priscilla Gustafson, a young couple with 2 kids and one on the way, unfortunately, was his next home, his next target. December 1st, 1987, Andrew, an attorney, had left for work, as usual. 8-year-old Abigail hopped on the bus and headed to school. Priscilla, a 33-year-old preschool teacher, took her 5-year-old son, William, to run a few errands. Neighbors recall seeing Priscilla arrive home after a few hours and hustle her son inside. Shortly after, Abigail returned home from school. And that was the last time any of them would be seen alive. When Andrew arrived home from work that evening, he found his whole family, his whole world, gone. His son, his daughter, and his pregnant wife. He first came across Priscilla in the bedroom. She was lying in a pool of blood. She had been raped and shot to death. She was naked and found with a pillow over her face. She had been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber gun. After seeing this gruesome scene, He was far too terrified to even go and look for his children. He knew if his children were alive, they would have been running to him at this point. So he feared the worst, and he went and called 911. While he stayed with his wife's dead body, he waited for police to arrive. When police searched the home, they found the 2 children drowned in 2 separate bathtubs in the home. William was found face down in an upstairs bathtub, and Abigail was found in a downstairs bathtub. In addition to being drowned, she had blunt force trauma to her head, as well as marks around her neck, consistent with being in like a chokehold while her head being held under the water. The small town of Townsend, Massachusetts, was in complete shock. The brutality of these murders was beyond any crime that they could even fathom. Who was so sick to murder a pregnant woman and her 2 young children? And this person was obviously still around, so they were terrified. The detectives already had a guess as to who it was, though, and they went to the home directly behind the Gustafsons' home, directly to Danny Laplante. While living in the home, when arriving to the home, Danny's mother answered the door, and they heard this loud crash come from somewhere far behind her. It was Danny, who busted through the back door and was running into the surrounding woods. Police chased after him, and after a brief search, they received a call about a hostage situation not far from where Danny made his escape. Danny had broken into the home of Pamela Michaela and was holding her at gunpoint while forcing her into her car. They drove to the next town, where Pamela was able to jump from the car, safely escaping the terror that was Danny Laplante. Police caught up to Danny, and he was arrested. He was charged with triple homicide and found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for the murders of the Gustafson family. In 2017, Danny's attorney filed an appeal for resentencing due to previous court cases that ruled a juvenile convicted of murder should be able to re-enter society at some point. June of 2019, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruled a hefty nope. No. Not Danny Laplante. He's never being reintroduced into society. Danny Laplante would never be eligible for parole, and he would serve out the rest of his life sentences. Until his death in 2014, Andrew Gustafson wore 2 wedding rings, one for his new marriage and one for his lost love, Priscilla. Such a tragic story with such a creepy, crazy guy. And, this is the type of shit that, people write books about. But at the same time, it's real. It's real. There really are these types of people out there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this creepy yet true story. And sweet dreams. I will talk to you guys later. Please like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And, see you guys later.